My favorite artist is Louise Bourgeois. She's French-born. She lives in Chelsea in New York, and she is a true inspiration. She's now 98 years old, and she is still producing art. And I'm sure, hopefully, like a lot of other people, I saw a retrospective of her work that was traveling around the world, and I was privileged enough to see it in Paris, of all her, in France, her birth country, and it's truly one of the most inspiring shows I've ever seen in my whole life. I couldn't stop talking about it. Her art is so emotional, so intense, so powerful, and she has found such a wonderful way of expressing herself. At the Centre Pompidou, there were many incredible pieces that were very effective, but definitely one of the ones that stood out, Destruction of the Father, I think it was called. And it is truly as if you descend into hell. It's the only way I can describe it. It's so disturbing and powerful, and I couldn't stop staring at it, but at the same time I felt like I have to walk away from this because it's so intense. And I think that is, in what I've read about her and the documentaries I've seen about her, obviously she had a very, complicated, complex relationship with her father, and his cheating was something that defined a lot of who she is in her art and her expression. But there was, I don't know, something so powerful and fascinating and truly emotional. And that is, I think that defines Louise Bourgeois in her art and sets her apart from probably most male artists, is that deep, intense emotion. What I was sort of thinking about in terms of women and men and the difference in not only the expression of art but also producing art is that men a lot of the time have somebody behind them, in most cases a woman, who will do their laundry, will make food, will take care of their children, will take care of most of the daily activities so that they can really fully spend their time expressing themselves in the way they want in their art. And for women, when you look at, all the women artists, that generally hasn't been the case. So they either have been childless or without, not married or whatever. But it's hard for a woman to find somebody that supportive who's willing to put themselves in their shadow or in the background to let the woman produce that kind of art. Because I think in order to produce the kind of art that somebody like Louise Bourgeois has produced, it takes living it, breathing it, eating it. I mean, there's no room for a whole lot of other stuff. And it probably is not an accident that her fame or success or, the recognition has come after the death of her husband, after the death of her father, when probably her children were grown up, and she could fully focus on herself on her art. And that, I think, is the biggest difference between men and women, and the fact that we generally don't have that type of support behind us so that we can freely just dedicate ourselves to our art. To me, the interesting thing about when I think about Swan Day, for example, is art is a wonderful form of communication. And so this is where women can communicate with one another. Because to me, when I film is one of my big passions. But when I watch movies and I see the name of a female director or a female writer, or I see an incredible performance by a woman, I am so inspired and I'm so proud. So I think it's really important. We have to take the competitive element out of this, which is really ugly and it doesn't do anybody any good, and just see this as a wonderful form of communication. Like it's on an international level, we can all communicate with one another without words, and whatever, Louise Bourgeois being a very good example of that. And maybe I relate to her so much because she's French, she's European, she moved to the United States and all of that kind of stuff, but she's expressing herself, and through her expression she's communicating with women around the world. And I think that, and we not only on Swan Day should we want to accomplish that, but throughout our lives in the future, every single day, that should be our goal and our mission, is that we're not just doing this for ourselves, we're doing this for everybody else, but certainly for women, so that we give them role models, we give them inspiration for something to achieve for themselves in the future.